Pushed off it by Daniher. Deliberate! Insufficient intent to keep the ball in. Joe Daniher's got it. Kick looks all right. Joe Daniher! Standing up in the big moments and delivering a clutch goal.
It is the Brisbane Lions Fancast back after one of the most memorable semi-finals wins. Redemption for 2019, and all in all will go down in possibly top 5 victories of Brisbane Lions history, especially when it comes to finals. My goodness me, when it all looked down and out, 44 points down against the Giants, who were absolutely rampaging, dominating in just about every aspect. Joe Daniher slots a goal he has no right to. Willk Ashcroft steps up and says, "Hey, I'm here to play September footy." And we get over the line in extraordinary circumstances. What a time to be a Lions fan. And a different time to be a Giants fan, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Patrick, how did you feel about that game? Because, you know, looking at the array of emotions across Brisbane Lions social media and you know, messages I've received and all sorts of stuff, it was our season in a nutshell, but for the better. The whole array of emotions has been felt.
I think I said last week that we didn't learn anything about our team, and I still think we haven't really learned anything about our team. Our best is very, very good. And yeah, to be honest, when the final siren went, I just kind of started laughing because I just thought it was so ridiculous. It's the most absurd game of football I think I've ever watched. Microcosm of the season, and the grand chasm between our bad and our good. Although that said, probably our bad was just shown up by a very good team as well. So who really knows in the end? We won. Brent Daniel will have absolute nightmares, and he'll have to sit and watch on repeat his goal against us in the semi-final from 5 years ago to try and help him kind of balance that one out. Good level of parity with that, I reckon. Him cocking up so badly. What a game. What a weird group of players we have.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly touching on Brett Day, I did feel bad for him. Not necessarily the advantage play on where he hacked it off the ground and obviously missed, but the 250-metre penalties, he got sucked in by Dunkley, and I think probably in that circumstance, common sense could prevail, and the umpire goes, "Come on, give it to the right person," without having to call a 50. The next time, he clearly didn't want to give it to the wrong person, held on to it as like, who do I give this ball to? Held on to it for too long, another 50. I did feel bad for him in that moment, but at the same time, I was like, I will take just about anything I can get to get.
I found that element funny with him saying, "There's 20,000 people here." Yeah. It's like, oh, that's not very many, man. Like, and also, no one gets away with that in 100,000 seater stadiums anyway. So, sorry.
All right, well, let's go back to the beginning. All the talk last week was about Jack Payne, his knee, his fitness. Was he going to play? The Lions were pretty steadfast that they were optimistic he was going to get up regardless. There was no structural damage to the knee. He just had to pass a fitness test. We saw him running around in bloody scaffolding around that knee on Tuesday, but by the time Thursday rolled around, he was running a bit more free. Still had a fair amount of tape going on, but and people say he had a bad game on the weekend, and yeah, he was shown up by the best forward in the competition. He didn't do a whole lot wrong, and I think most defenders probably would have had a similar game on Hogan. A couple of the goals that Hogan got were just complete out of his arse, as with Toby Green as well. Like, at least 2 out of 3 goals that Toby Green kicked were out of his arse. The other one was a stupid turner from our mate Zorko, which we'll get to. But all in all, I don't think Jack Payne was that bad.
No, because I suppose if you look at it and go, the amount of times Hogan's kicked multiple goals and that many goals in other games has against very fully fit defenders. So I think Payne stood up in the fourth quarter when it really mattered, keeping Hogan statless, which I think is probably more down to like the manic pressure we were kind of putting on at that stage anyway, and they were rattled. So it's amazing what can happen when you got pressure on the ball coming in, and it's not just us giving them the ball or doing stupid shit, basically.
They they obviously brought back Toby Bedford into the team. He did a great job on Neil. Peatling did a number on Zorko. Himmelberg did a number on Cam Rayner, who was clearly frustrated across the night. He gave away an early one in the defensive 50 at a forward 50 stoppage. And he gave away 2 in the last quarter, which were real momentum busters. Thankfully, it didn't have the final say on the game, but yeah, a dour night for Cam Rayner. They won a lot of their sort of key matchups. Like Briggs was like Oscar had a good game. Like I really enjoyed Oscar's game. He competed all game, but Briggs obviously got the chockies in that battle as well. So yeah, Taylor and Buckley did pretty good jobs on our key forwards. Joe just bobbed up when he had to. So just any way you look at it, GWS were just so much better. Like you look at the team stats and they've won everything that matters. You know, they arguably had the best player on the ground, well, best players on the ground with Tom Green and Jesse Hogan, who could have and should have been match winners. But yeah, just that ridiculous momentum. We had that big burst in the third and another one in the fourth. When it looked like all our chickens were going to come home to roost when we were sitting at 4-12 or whatever it was for such a long time. Honestly, just one of the most miraculous victories and one that will be remembered for a very, very long time. And you could see the joy, relief, excitement, happiness on everyone's face when that siren blew. Like from Fags to even Logan Morris, who had a poor night, got subbed out. He was over the moon. Everyone just was enjoying that.
Yeah, I think matchups is an interesting one as well because I think, traditionally 2 of GWS's more damaging players, being Kelly and Whitfield, were quite quiet as well. So I'd say, on the whole, in terms of output, you'd probably say Kalachi. If Kalachi had kicked straight, holy shit, man!
Yeah,
like he would have absolutely destroyed Whitfield. Like Whitfield wasn't moving the ball in any way tangible to how they've sort of played, and Josh Kelly's normally way more damaging than he is. It was almost back to kind of faceless territory for those two because they sort of just weren't really large features. And I think with GWS, it's worth noting that they do accumulate a lot of stats as well. They're a high stat team, and sometimes the impact can be lost. Tom Green doing his best Nick Dacos impersonation with the 45% disposal efficiency. So, it's all well, but he was a brute. And there were definitely moments in the game with Dunkley going to him at the beginning. And then I don't know if you saw, but Fagan was pretty level-headed all night. But there was one moment where he was talking to Josh Dunkley and he just said, just hunt the ball. Just hunt the ball. You could lip read him. And after that, I thought Dunkley really lifted and was probably on par with Tom Green in the back half of the game. Although it was just sort of the first couple of quarters that kind of had that discrepancy. So, yeah, it's like on the whole, I suppose if you look at a team that's played the better football for 2.5 quarters versus a team that's played the better football for a quarter and a half, which is what we did, the matchups are going to be slightly distorted. So,
the other thing is that we just could not get our game going. Like throughout the game at all, like our kick mark game couldn't get going. It was hard enough to get our clearance and stoppage game going. Our territory game, it all got stifled. And for all money, it looked like GWS were just going to run away with this, especially when they got 44 points up. But we just could not get any sort of semblance of our game to show. And it looked like it was going to be a walkover. And, I think most Lions fans throughout that game would have resigned themselves at some point going, this is just a mauling. Like, yeah, we're showing a little bit of respect on the scoreboard. We're keeping it close, but then it started to blow out, and you're like, okay, this is the natural progression of this game. It is going to be round 8 or round 7 all over again, and that's the way it's going to unfold. And so be it. And so comes a close to 2024, but no one expected what was going to happen in the back half of that game because that's not our go. As Fagan touches, like we're not a come from behind team. We're the people that get out in front and then get that lead pissed away, not the opposite. So the only other time we've done it was Melbourne, and it wasn't nearly as dramatic. Yeah. So yeah.
The first quarter was interesting though. Like GWS's strategy, like as you said, we just couldn't. We weren't playing our game, and we weren't able to play our game for such a long time because anytime anything got going, they would score a goal. Like, they were so good at arresting momentum in like ways that were sort of almost 50-meter penalties that weren't, in terms of just sitting on guys on the mark, flooding back, just momentum stiflers. But the first quarter, I don't think I've seen that many players around a stoppage.
Yeah.
Like, consistently. And it was a really high stoppage game, but they were just flooding the contest with like what would be probably considered their role players. And then they had a lot of class around in one-on-ones, in a lot of space around the ground. And that's where they were doing a lot of damage. And we were really lucky to be where we were at quarter time, to be perfectly honest, which is funny because we also kicked poorly. So it was like maximum damage from minimum sort of like ability to get there. But yeah, I hadn't seen that many players around stoppage in a long time.
And we did nothing to help ourselves either. Like, ill-disciplined, poor kicks. I mean, Zorko was having one of those games, obviously getting frustrated by Peatling's job on him. Peatling kicked 2 goals. Zorko gave away some stupid free kicks. And Harris trying to... And just blind, panicked handballs into the corridor when, the option to take it over the line. And we just looked stressed and panicked by the pressure that GWS were putting on. Whereas, anytime they got the ball in some sort of chaos, they were chaining out with handballs, just like they do. That's like what we know GWS are good at. And we fed into it in just about every way as well for that first half.
Well, football's a funny game because you well and truly make your own luck. But holy shit, were they getting every weird bounce, every weird knock on. Like, everything was breaking their way. Like, it was no more evident than that one where Zorko spoiled that went perfectly back across the goal in the wrong direction to how his fist went. But then you make your own luck in terms of he didn't track Peatling for the goal. And then the other one where like the ball bounced and it was like over-ending towards Payne and then decided to like do a leg break, not Payne's leg, cricket leg break, and just went over his shoulder straight to Hogan, and he just like, and it's just like, what the hell? What can you do against that kind of a thing when you're really, when you're not making your own luck and that happens, you sort of just like, okay, all right, cool. Like, but that like changed, and it changed when the pressure that we brought and getting control of the game in the third quarter and in spurts. Like, I think probably the most admirable thing on the whole was that when they kicked the 2 goals at the end of the third quarter, that felt like it really could have just been like, all right, gut punch, game's over.
Yeah, it's like we had our run of momentum. We piled on that guy in a very brief period of time. What was it? 18 kicks for 5 goals or something. It was just bang, bang, bang. And you thought to yourself, all right, if we can keep this up, we're a shot here. But then they steadied just before the 3/4 time, stopped the bleeding, kicked a couple of their own. You're like, okay, that was our run, and we left it too late. But evidently there was more to come in the fourth. And
the startling thing is that we lost the third quarter.
I know, that's crazy.
Like, I find that to be so utterly absurd.
And then even in the fourth, when Toby Green puts through that goal where he's on the ground and like Harris and Starcevich are just sort of standing over him, like waiting for him to, because he went the handball, like he fanged the handball, realized, I might just stand up and kick it. And then you see Harris with his like head in his hands on the ground. You're like, oh no, like,
There's a bit of shades of Charlie Cameron against St Kilda a few years ago in that one, but it was more just because Toby didn't have possession of the ball, so they couldn't tackle him.
Yeah.
It was like this weird brain play where he's like, well, if I just don't touch the ball, they won't tackle me or I'll get a free kick. What a weird time to be alive.
It was probably not like, it was a weird one because it was a game for, Darcy Wilmot is probably his poorest game of the year. And he didn't have a terrible game or anything, but definitely not the contribution we're used to seeing from him. And that probably comes down to the fact that we just weren't getting our ball movement going, and he's an integral part of that. Stars battled manfully, and, like I said, those Toby Green goals, the 3 of them, one was just completely out of his ass, their second goal. The other one we just spoke about, and the third was from a turnover. Noah
There's
Ansell,
not a lot. Not a lot you can do with, like, it's a bit like the Bobby Hill grand final last year, where it's like Yeah, his direct man kicked 4 goals, but he was only on him for one of them.
Yeah.
So is it really his fault? You're not guaranteeing that Harris Andrews is going to handball the ball into the corridor straight to him or whatever happened. So I thought Starcevich was really good.
Yeah, solid game. Is like he's put together the 6 to 8 weeks leading up to the final series. He's been like right back to his best, like his 2021, 22 form.
Told you, man, the ship of Theseus. Start of the year, I called it. He's back, baby. The bald head, the chrome dome.
The other people want to talk about, because we had a chat off air before this, is just it's going to be hard to do votes this week because there's a lot that could feature. Like I said, I mentioned before, Oscar had a great game. The numbers won't show he got absolutely smashed in the hitouts in the ruck contest, but his contest all game, like he moved forward, he hit the scoreboard. He's always integral for our momentum. Like when we need to get the team going, like Oscar is more often than not a big part of that. He ended up with 464 meters gained, which is fucking ridiculous for a ruckman. Dunkley, we've touched on as well. He had various roles, Green and Kelly as well across the game. McCluggage is very stiff to miss out of my votes today. I thought he was brilliant.
Yeah, there were a lot that really contributed in a really meaningful way, and even guys that sort of I thought GWS is so good at holding the man without holding the man throughout that game. There would have been a lot of frustration in that forward line, particularly between Joe. I thought Cam Rayner was like literally held quite a lot of the game as well, and that's why he was getting pissed off. But even we'll probably talk about Hipwood as well, because there's no way he's moving fully fit.
No, he's and it's funny, you see everything that's coming out during the game where people are obviously upset at how the way the game's going, and it was it's a bad day to have a bad day, especially when it's Bailey, Rayner, Hipwood, who all were having poor nights. And yeah, Hipwood, since coming back from that groin, he's not the same. He's still contributing. It's
not the sort of, you wouldn't be surprised if he went and had surgery in the off season.
He 100% will.
But all I'll say is people that kind of, let's say, don't understand or don't notice the input that he has, because he kicked a goal, fair enough. But I think the most important thing he did was in the lead up to the Fletcher goal, where if you 100%. Go back and look at that before, and it's not so much the handball to McCluggage, it's before that. So
it's the attack of the contest as well.
Yeah, he causes Toby Green to panic and just throw the ball forward, basically, because he blocked off about 3 people with his giant eagle arm span, where he's like, all right, cool, you can't just handball it back for a cheap one. Go forward. And then it was a turnover when he followed up, went back to him, and it went through. Like, that's the sort of stuff he does all the fucking time that is not picked up on a TV screen because the angles are too tight. He's kind of a victim of modern cinematography. And that's not to say that he's all bloody Oscar winning. He's not. But at the same time, he's our second tall forward. He's not our main man. And I'd almost argue that when the team is firing well, he's our third target.
Yeah.
Find me a third ranked forward in the competition that has that level of threat. We talked about it, I think, at the start of the year. It was like, who's the fella from Geelong that looks like him but a bit less weird?
Ollie Henry.
Ollie Henry. He was probably the most threatening third aside from him. So it's and I think Hip would kick more goals than him in that year anyway. So, but whatever, neither here nor there. He's important to the team, and there's a reason why Logan Morris went off instead of him, because it's just a little bit of game smarts. And I know that seems insane talking about Hipwood and smart, but I don't think he's as stupid as it semes.
No, I don't think
certainly
so.
Not brain fadey like Joe, but I mean everyone says that about Joe. So yeah, and it was Bailey kicked a good goal. It was just sort of, and Rayner sort of tried to go to work with physical impact and creating contests and stuff like that. He probably knew that he couldn't do shit, so he's like, well, I'll just throw my weight around.
Yeah, and his last quarter, he had a few crucial moments as well. Obviously, Dane Zorko's first half and second half were night and day as well.
Yep. Yeah, there were warning signs in that first quarter.
Oh yeah,
Quite a lot of that stuff that I'm not sure who the fella that did the quotings that we did in the buy. Some of the insane shit that I came up with is starting to read pretty well, but I'm glad it didn't in the end. And like that's what happens when you have a halfbacker who's been a goal sneak his entire career.
And as you mentioned off air as well, it was sort of it coincided with when McKenna came on the ground as well.
Yeah, so talking about the importance of McKenna coming on, it took the pressure off because we knew we weren't getting a great deal of drive off halfback because it wasn't working any which way. We just needed to take territory and try and, we ended up, I think, winning clearance.
Yep.
Minorly.
Yeah, just.
And it just ended up being a territory battle. And Faig said that we were playing the chaos game, and there's no surprise as to why Wilmot had a quiet game. Although that said, his little pop over the top in that was amazing. He literally did do a volleyball dig, so full credit. The drive off halfback wasn't really there, so the ability to take Peatling and put him in a position he was less comfortable in, it yielded 2 goals for Zorko. So that's like, for people that think that Fagan is unwilling or unable to change the game, that's an example there, and it's sort of a small level of doing it because he doesn't like to do giant wholesale changes because his coaching style is different. It's kind of unique to the game where, and he talked about it very clearly in the press conference where he said he's giving these people, the players, the foundation to make their own decisions.
Yep.
And I thought he spoke so well in saying, particularly talking about the Payne and Andrews thing, which we'll talk about because some of the stuff that's being said in the media is insane regarding that. But keeping the matchups as is and trusting his players when they're down is the time to trust the players. Because if you're like, it's not working, I will regress that decision, that's showing that you don't actually trust the players.
Yeah.
So for all measure, there were a couple of things he did, small things, subtle things, and they all really worked. The most important catalyst was Ashcroft going into the midfield.
Yeah, and we will definitely have a chat about that fella in the votes, you'd have to think. Another bloke I want to have a chat about real quick as well was Noah Answorth, who, 11 tackles is probably the one that stands out, but he's constant pressure all night. His ball use was something he's been criticised on in the past, and he openly said at the start of this year as well that it's the one thing he worked on because he heard the outside noise about his ball use and really went to work on it. But, he was in real danger of losing his spot, I think. But I think it's a blessing in disguise in the month leading up to finals where a couple of small forwards have got a hold of us that, it was sort of, all right, we need to get Noah back in. He's held his spot, and, more often than not, he's one of the first to get dropped for, like, he was, Payne holds his spot, or does Bruce come in, or maybe we take Noah out, or Connor out, or something like that. So he is one of those ones that has been on the fringe his entire career, basically, but like, he just showed how important he was on the weekend because the kid with the lid, as they say, who's got a hold of us the last couple of times we've played GWS, had, bugger all to say about the whole thing. And he did it, Brent Daniels as well, who we know has, had moments where Alex withered and gave up the chase, and that signalled his end of his career at the Brisbane Lions.
Did you hear Chris Fagan before the game? It was pretty satisfying hearing him say, we went with Noah because we wanted more defender-first defenders rather than attacking defenders. And I was like, I've been saying that for like 6 months. Like, finally.
No, it's good.
So
I
that
think
was
the team balance is it's right on at the moment, which is obviously what you want coming into finals and barring injuries. And, obviously we'll have a chat about Lucky and his foot, which is probably going to dominate the media this week in the same way that Jack Payne
smoke
did
screen.
last week.
It's all smoke screen.
Well, I sure hope
but
so.
I'd be willing to say we should call Noah Answorth a vacuum cleaner because he's just in there hoovering up all of the ground balls in the defensive half, which has been our biggest weakness for 2 years. So
100%.
More of the little Hoover, I say, the little weird Matthew Richardson looking Dyson vacuum. So love that. I thought Jasper Fletcher also very, very serviceable game.
Yeah, big
You know,
time.
he was on the wing and he came up clutch with a goal, and he's just there. He's just there all the time, and I think you said it really well last week when you said you bumped into Marcus, and you said
Adrian.
he doesn't lose his one. Oh, sorry, Adrian. What did I say? Marcus Ashcroft. Shit. Well, whatever. It's probably all one big family in the end, anyway. He doesn't lose his one-on-ones, or if he does, it's very rarely, and he just keeps going. And I think this season will be, I think, it's like a launch pad for him to be a really damaging player going forward.
Yeah. I mean, he ended up with 3 clearances as well, which is, for a winger, probably not expected at all. All right. That's probably, in terms of players, I really wanted to mention in the lead up to votes, because we're going to have a bit of an extended chat about a few players here, I would imagine.
But before we go, I don't know that Leicester's going to get any votes, but man, that guy was really pissed off when we were down by quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And because he's like, guys, I might not be in the team next year if Duday comes back, so just fucking pick it up. And he was mad, and I liked it. That one where he got hospital passed by Zorko, and he just managed to get his elbow down. I was so grateful because,
oh my God.
I mean, that was like a ruptured spleen waiting to happen.
Yeah, that was grim.
All right, on to the votes.
The votes for hoponbrewerytours.com.au, where you can book yourself for a full day tour right now at that very website. You can even organise gift vouchers if you're looking for Christmas presents coming up. Hey, think about that. The 3, 2, 1 for the semi-finals, and we may land on very similar names here, but for me, the 1 goes to Archie for reasons you spoke about before. If the job that he did on Whitfield was amazing, and you'd have to think he's got another job with Tom Stewart coming up this week. Jared Berry, how good was he? How good was he all game? And the little man himself, Willk Ashcroft, with one of the most immense second halves I've ever seen, and that goal that he created, where he took on seemingly 19
the weird
GWS
side
players.
camera view. We never got a broadcast.
Took on so many GWS players. 6 or 7 of them, got the ball out to Kai, who sneaked the goal. That was outrageous, and he is a big game player. You can just see it. He's featured in the votes last week for me, and I would imagine he's probably going to get at least your 2 votes this week, because he was just ridiculous. And in a night where Neil was getting blanketed very, very well by Bedford, he stood up and said, I'm not here for a fucking haircut. Let's get this game.
Well, him going into the midfield, it gave Bedford room for pause, because there were some centre bounces where Bedford was lining up on Ashcroft. I think I said that before. I don't know if it was off air or on air, but yeah, it made them think, and it made them have to reassess some of the matchups and stuff like that. How good. Yeah, Cal Archie is proving to be just such an important cog in the machine for us at the moment. He won't get a vote for me this week because I gave him a vote last week, basically.
Sure.
So I'm using that old get out. But no, I went 1 for Berry, 2 for Joe, and 3 for Ashcroft, because I think, although Joe technically the match winner, it doesn't happen without Ashcroft's work. And to put it this way, if not Jake Riccardi, who's there? Finn Callahan. If Finn Callahan had the last quarter that Jared Berry had,
yeah,
in terms of the lengthening strides and the running through the midfield and the hard running, people would be talking like Bont 2.0.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Jared Berry does it, and it's like, all right, cool. It's Jared Berry. He got a bit of plaudits, so that's good. But you can tell, and I think Fagan said it, he said some of the senior players and some of the people that didn't necessarily, that didn't do so well in the finals last year are really standing up, or that, are kind of towards the end of their career. I'm not saying Jared Berry is, but he had a not so great game in the grand final, and I think he's got a bit that he's unhappy about, I think. So.
And fair enough, because I suppose in the post-mortem of that grand final, it was hard for most people to look past the the 50-meter penalties that he gave away that led to the side bottom goal and everything. So he obviously would have had that weighing on him all summer, and and he's really stepped up. And like just his work across that sort of halfback, wing, midfield, the way he's balancing that role, and just like Noah, he scooped up a lot of ground balls, got a lot of our ball movement going as well. Just honestly, one of his best games by a long, long way, Joe Barry.
He sort of was using the Nigel Lappin prototype of using his run, using his kind of screening ability to kind of get the ball and make stuff happen, which is, I think, something that we've all kind of been like, oh, this guy could be a bit like Nigel Lappin. And that was one of the times where you're like, yeah, maybe he can. So if you can be like Nigel Lappin, if you can be half as good as Nigel Lappin, that's an asset to any team. So loved it. And yeah, Joe, he, what an idiot.
My best idiot.
Yeah.
When that ball went out, and people are going, "Oh, how is that deliberate?" But I mean, look at the tackle that led to it before. That probably should have been incorrect disposal as well.
Look at the throw.
Yeah,
he just pegged the ball out.
yeah, and then you see Joe line up for it, and you're like, "Well, sure, he's got no right to kick this. It's on the left boundary. A decent angle. There's obviously wind going around." He didn't look fazed by it whatsoever. Like, wanted the moment and just slotted it. Crazy. Crazy.
Some of the stuff I saw, just, we went back going back a few weeks where I think we lost a game, and someone said, live by the Joe, die by the Joe. And This is very much live by the Joe. I also saw another one, which was the Joe giveth and the Joe giveth.
Yeah, I saw that. That was good too.
Oh, yeah, cool. Very nice. Yeah, the memes were all there for everybody to have in that game, and it's no surprise because what an absolutely, utterly bonkers, stupid game.
Yeah.
Imagine if you let's say that you support some shit team down the bottom of the table, and you're like, all right, well, I'm going to watch the finals, and you've watched the last two games we just had. How much fun are you having? Because I'm assuming you're not dealing with potential cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
So
you're just enjoying.
You're
good
sitting
footy,
there going,
yeah.
all right, great, cool. We've got these Hawthorn upstarts against Port Adelaide, and then you've got all the rigmarole after that game, and then you got this shit going on. Have fun. Anyone that isn't a Lions fan that listens, all 0.2 of them, let me know.
Yeah. Honestly, it would be a whole heap of fun to watch, especially this week. It's a great weekend of finals. And I guess we'll have a chat about Port Adelaide and Hawthorn a little bit later on. I didn't solicit for questions this week because I wanted to give us time to chat about, what's just gone and what's to come as well, because we've got another prelim against Geelong for the third time in 5 years, which is
like bloody clockwork.
Yep, obviously barrels of fun, and it's a weird one. I keep oscillating between how I'm feeling about this game coming up. But before we get there, let's have a quick look at the girls and the VFL. So another prelim for the VFL team and another loss to Werribee to miss out on a grand final spot. Unfortunately,
to put things in perspective, I was working out in Ballarat that day, and it was disgusting weather. It was
atrocious.
It was so cold. I didn't wear gloves all of winter, and I wore gloves yesterday.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So super cold. It hailed.
Yeah.
Absolutely breezy as all shit. And you could tell the game at Footscray as well. Similar sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, not great football and conditions. Also, the blokes were kind of hamstrung by not having Fort, Sharp, Joyce.
Yeah.
And those are big outs. And I think that makes a massive difference. But read us the riot act, Brooksy.
Pretty commendable performance, if I'm perfectly honest. Revel was good. JL in his last game in Lions colours was, did everything he possibly could. Won the clearances, won all comers with numbers. But I guess the story of the VFL over the last month or so is Liam Hewd, who's come into the team and has looked a very, very dangerous forward who's kicked multiple goals in basically every game he's played over the last month, and definitely someone to look out for in the coming years, because he has been a diamond in the rough, a rare find. And Brandon Ryan's put together a couple of good weeks as well. Zach Ostelsky he's building, and he's a project piece, but I think there may come a time in the next 5 years where he may be getting some senior games. But there will be a lot of players that walked off that ground that will probably have played their last game for the Lions, unfortunately. And we should talk about your mate Jared Lyons, because as much fun as we've had with him over the years, and personally, I haven't got a vendetta against the bloke. I think he's been an amazing servant for the club and really instrumental in our build up the ladder in the last 6-7 years. I don't know if you had the chance to watch his retirement speech and what Fags had to say about him, but the thing that got me after the speech and after Fags had said his bit and stuff, and he's gone around, hugging and handshaking all the players, and he doesn't know that the cameras are still rolling in that time because it's just junk. Like, he's just chatting to all the players, and the amount of times he said, "I fucking love this club," it was just really, really nice. And you could tell with everything that he said, not just about us, but his time at the Crows and the Suns as well, but the way he spoke about this club, and him and Oscar have been doing work with the girls team, which has been really good as well. Like, you can see the effect it's having on people like Ali Anderson. But I remember when he first came to the club and the role he was going to play, and he just spoke about stoppage and centre bounce. He said that's my baby. Like, I'm obsessed with it. And you can see he's putting that into practice with the girls now, and I think he's going to make a pretty good midfield coach somewhere.
Yeah, I agree, and I like the fact that he's kind of gone into that sort of development thing. I know I've had fun with it, and it's lined up like perfectly with this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's JL is kind of a victim of A, getting an injury at the wrong time, and B, the game just changing.
Yeah.
But from 2019 through to, I'm going to say 2021.
Maybe even more, 2022. I mean, he was our sub in the grand final last year. He had roles to play.
Yeah, but I think in terms of his he was really good, like very stiff to not be All-Australian in some of those years early on, and he just kind of provided a bit of stability, and he was basically the Josh Dunkley before Josh Dunkley was there.
Yeah, 100%.
And we've talked throughout the year that when you're a team looking for incremental upgrades, that's an incremental upgrade of going, okay, we'll put Josh Dunkley in instead of Jared Lyons. So that's kind of the crux of it. But I still have such fond memories of him, getting holding the balls on Dustin Martin.
Yeah.
Chopping the fend. He was like the first player to do that. People think it's Mitch Robinson, but it was JL. He was a great servant to the club, and it's just a bit of a shame that he had issues with his legs, and the game speed just kind of it surpassed him into what he does. It's why he suits the VFL so well in his later years, because it's much more stoppage based, it's much heavier congestion and stuff like that, and that is absolutely where he is an elite player.
Yeah. And he knows his limitations as well. He touched on his retirement speech because he spoke about his son. He's like, I've reached enough games here that hopefully he can be father-son. Unfortunately, he's inherited my running style. So he knows, like, he's no idiot. And Fake spoke about it as well, that he knew where he was at with his career. And he's right. He didn't whinge about it, didn't kick up a fuss, went about his business and did what he could to help the team, whether that was in the sub role last year or in the development with the girls or the VFL. And yeah, we should pay him his dues because, as I said, instrumental to our climbing up the ladder. And that year that Dane Beams screwed us over, went back to Collingwood, we were like, oh, how are we going to replace him? And we ended up getting in Lockie Neal and Jared Lyons. You're like, well, yeah, I think we've replaced him and then some. So
we almost ended up with two that were all Australian caliber in that year, and we're like, oh, well, who gives a shit? So it was, yeah. I think the fondness for his contribution to the club will continue to grow. For me, particularly, because obviously, I've got a lens that I view it, and it's based on my own preconceived stupidity and stuff like that, but it's also just symptomatic of where we are as a club. So I really am happy he's at the club.
Yeah, and I hope he sticks around in some aspect, but if not, he'll get a job. He'll get a job in the AFL.
It would be foolish to not kind of go for that, because we've talked about it at length at the difficulty of getting things like assistant coaches and development coaches and stuff like that, because there's not quite as many of them up in Brisbane, or if they are, they're a slightly lower caliber or less high profile and stuff like that. And it would be foolish for him to either not do a stint in terms of development or midfield in either one of the VFL or the girls, and then look at that as almost like an internship for a first team role, if he doesn't go into a first team role straight away.
Yeah.
Because the beauty of probably playing seconds, and although I assume he's been working bloody hard to try and get back into the ones, he's probably been going, okay, my career's winding down, I got to think of some other things here.
Yeah,
so
100%.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't be unhappy to see him in the coach's box next year. Not coaching, but like around assistant coaching.
Yeah, of course.
That's the one. Head coach JL.
So 2 years in a row, Werriby's done us in the prelim, which is obviously a shame. What I will say though, it is good to see a VFL grand final featuring two, I guess, standalone VFL teams in Southport and Werribee, which is nice, because obviously the Gold Coast, with however many key forwards they just had on their list last year, just tore it apart. So, and good to see. Like I got a soft spot for Southport as well. I really like how professional for a state level team they are. They are just really, really good, really professional. They're sort of like the Geelong of state league footy, just always there. So that'll be a cracking match, the VFL grand final next week. So
we both got bloody horses in the race, because you've got a soft spot for Southport and I'm basically a Werribee local. So,
well, there you go. Yeah. And as I mentioned last year,
it's on, Brooksy. It's on. Like, fucking have at it, mate.
The girls, on the other hand, absolutely back to their best with a destruction of Collingwood on Friday night, 72-20, 10 goals, 12. Ali Anderson had a quiet game by her standards after breaking the record last week. Just a mere 21 touches and 4 clearances for her this week, which is probably gassed after last week. But Belle Dawes, who is unashamedly my favourite player in the AFLW, really stood up, hit the scoreboard as well. Tay Smith with 3 goals. Sophie Conway was absolutely fantastic with 3 as well. And then singles to the Spark sisters, O'Dwyer and Dawes, as I mentioned before. Absolutely tore Collingwood a new one. And I think that first week against North Melbourne, where we did not show up, our defensive structure was absolutely all over the shop. Put together 2 very good weeks of Brisbane Lions AFLW footy. So look out for them to start climbing the ladder again very shortly. And as I said, I will get more into the women's footy over the next couple of weeks as the men wind down. But it is hard to give it my undivided attention at the moment, as I'm sure. I still watch every game, but I'm not sitting there. I'm not going to say analysing it, because you could argue I'm not exactly analysing what the men are doing either. But
I pretend that I am.
Yeah. But really good to see them back on it. And, once again, as I mentioned last week, just as a club, the VFL made another prelim. The men have made at least another prelim. And the girls are going back at it again. So as a club, we're in a really, really strong position.
Yeah, nothing really more to say in terms of just when you got people that are on the adder at the club and retiring that are saying that they love the club. I need to check that video out, because I haven't seen it.
Honestly, it is a little tearjerker, that one with JL.
They're all tearjerkers, and I never jerk no tears, so we'll see. But yeah, I think the club's in great shape at the moment, and yeah, I mean, there's always going to be things that people want differently, but what are you going to do? Like prelim, grand final, like, okay, perfectionist. Can't always get what you want. But yeah, no, great stuff for the others. And yeah, it was a bit of a shame to see, going back to the VFL, them sort of, they got towed pretty badly in the last quarter, but I think just a lack of some of the outside running class was probably what was missing. So no shame in that.
No, not at all. All right, well, as I said, I didn't solicit for questions this week. So what we're going to do, thanks to Crisp Communications, crispcoms.co, offering you free Brisbane Lions Fancast stickers. We're going to have a look at our prelim final coming up against Geelong. And as I said, I keep oscillating between how I'm feeling about this game, because on paper, like in if I'm comparing it to the GWS game, it's like, well, he should go here. They haven't necessarily got the players to do that job on ours. It should, in theory, be an easier game, and like, what's going to be as tough as what we just faced? And then I think to myself, oh, but it's Geelong, and they just win finals because that's what they do. And they made a miss of Port, clearly. It's hard to know what to take away from that game, but, they've obviously got some pretty dangerous small forwards as well, including a bloke that tore us up in the VFL last year in Shaw Manor. They got, Close, Myers, Ollie Henry, as you mentioned, and and Stengel as well. Yeah,
Stengel.
What we do know,
I like that. Old mate just worked.
Yeah. But what we do know
Brian
is
Myers, your mate Brian
Yeah.
Myers, that hasn't come to the Lions and won a Brownlow yet, so you don't have to name a child Brian. So
yeah, and then
you dodged that bullet.
you think to yourself, well, okay, Jesse Hogan's out of the way. We've taken on the best forward in the game, and he did a number on Payne. But now it's Shannon Neal or maybe Tom Hawkins if they decide to pull that trigger. I doubt it. I don't think Chris Scott's going to be messing with that team, if I'm perfectly honest. But Leicester.
I don't know if Tom Hawkins plays. Could you have two single-legged players playing on one another in a prelim? Like, that would be kind of unprecedented to have. His knee's gone, his foot's gone. Just chuck them in together. Could be funny. And then you're saying Shannon Neal, and then obviously Jeremy Cameron, who's back in some pretty good form.
That's right, but if we remember back to that game against Geelong at the Gabba where it was pissing down and we kicked 3 goals 14 or 4-13 or something stupid like that. It just didn't adjust to the conditions whatsoever. But one thing that does get forgotten in that game is that Ryan Lester did a number on Jeremy Cameron, who was in blistering form at that stage as well. So,
we love that didn't get mentioned at all because they were like, oh, well, it was raining.
Yeah.
That was what all the thing, because I think Cameron was in a slight form slump for him. And it just completely got ignored. But, I'm saying it again, put Froggy on him, just pop him up on caffeine all week and just send him with him all around the ground.
You have to do that. You got Payne that will take Neil, and then it leaves Harris open to help out with Jeremy Cameron in those needs, and Roman hopefully take off those kicks, because there isn't a Cadman running around. There is Ollie Henry, which you think, who knows who's going to take that matchup, but the wild card is obviously Tom Stewart will come back into that team, and we've seen across the year, if you do a number on Tom Stewart, if you tag him out of the game, then you go a long way to winning that game of footy. So that's potentially a role for Archie if he does in fact start in the halfback. Or obviously Chris Scott's been playing him in the midfield as well, and then pushing back. So there could be a job for Dunkley there as well if he hasn't got his hands tied with Dangerfield, who is still their most important player, which is ridiculous. And then it's Max Holmes as well that you've got to worry about, who, well, he's really showing, why he's been so heavily touted. And that game against Port Adelaide, he was ridiculous. So we've got to have someone with the running power to go with him.
Yeah, it's an odd one matchup-wise, because there's still, funnily enough, I don't watch a great lot of Geelong, and they kind of are suffering from an element of there are players that are all kind of a bit samey. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's hard to sort of know what's going on because all the focus is on Dangerfield and Cameron. So, guys like Jack Bowes and guys like Holmes and stuff like that, Tanner Bruin, they're all running around. But if you ask me to pick them apart, I'd be like, yeah, shit, it's a bit North Melbourne-y. So, sorry, my throat's a bit, roasted, so forgive me for that. I know I probably should have said that about 45 minutes ago, but here we are. Again, I kind of think it's an element of... they'll probably be more wary of us. We're kind of in it, and we're in it. But I don't know that there's too many Geelong people that are particularly keen to mess with us, because our best is so good.
Yeah, we know that, but how often have we been able to produce it for 4 quarters of footy? That is that's the question. The other thing is
twice recently, and that's about it. So.
The other thing you've got to consider is they've had the week off, and we've just absolutely slogged it out. And my worry is that was our grand final last week, just gone as well against GWS, that we cashed in all our tickets there, and that's a worry. I'm not saying that's what the players are going to be thinking, but they've got to back it up. It's going to be tough to back that up when Geelong have been sitting pretty for a week after a fairly bruise-free encounter against Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval.
Will they be conservative, though?
Who knows? Who knows? They are so well coached, though. And it's been said before, and it'll be said again with Chris Scott at the helm with that list. It's not a premiership list. It's not a premiership list, but yet again, Chris Scott has taken them through to a prelim. The question marks over their midfield just hasn't been what it is. And in the prelims we've come up against them, that's where we've been absolutely hammered.
Yeah, I think slightly different times.
Yeah.
We've run into them at times where have been almost like landmark points in history. We were a bit probably young and naive in 2020, and then in 2022 we were not really in that great shape.
Well, that and no one was stopping Geelong.
Yeah, they were so far the best team by an absolute mile that year. So this could be a bit different because I think there's very much case to be made that we're a better team than they are. We just fucked up the season a bit. So, but yeah, the rest is interesting. But I think they'll be equally, if not more, worried about us than we should be about them. It's what do they say about snakes or spiders or something like dogs,
bears
Which
or something.
one?
I don't know. One of them. Yeah,
cats.
It's a tough one. I don't think. They've got enough experience on the list that have played finals, that will be able to impart, knowledge and tell them not to get overawed by the experience. They've still got a fair amount of young players, like Dempsey as well. Dempsey's a tough matchup. They've just got those small to medium forwards that, Zorko and McKenna are going to have to defend, as well as Starcevic and Answorth.
Yeah, I think a lot of it can just be kind of choked at the source, and that's the thing. Like their running power out of midfield is still there, but is it as all four quarters as well? Maybe with Max Holmes, but can Danger run out? What if Dangerfield goes out with like a hamstring in the first quarter? That would be. Can we get some fucking voodoo on that, please? Not that we're injury cheering. We would never do that, wouldn't we?
No, we couldn't do that.
But no, they've got big players, and I think it's, as you said, it's a matter if you can stop their big players, if you can keep Jeremy Cameron quiet, if you can keep Tom Stewart quiet. Yeah, matchups are there. So, in terms of who will play on who really knows? Because you can send Berry there. How's Lockie Neal at this point in time? I know there's a lot of speculation about it, but he'll play. They'll just juice him up to the gills and he'll be good to go. So
it's another bloke that's probably going to have an off-season surgery as soon as he can on this foot or this ankle or whatever it is that's giving him grief. But yeah, obviously that last couple of minutes in the Georgas game where he's limping around and then moon boot the next couple of days is obviously not ideal. But yeah, he'll be fine to go. It very much like, 2021 where he was playing injured with that shoulder basically the whole year, and he's back and whatnot, and just painkillers before every game to get him over the line. So he's limping towards the end of the season, but still battling away. And Mark O'Connor has obviously played a pretty big role in him, especially when we play him in the home and away. I don't know if Chris Scott is going to roll the dice on Mark O'Connor being a finals player, a prelim finals player, but he has got a good history on Neil as well.
It could be one of the ones where maybe he gets named as an emergency, and then it's kind of, what are they going to do? I think they did that with Nakos and the bloke from Hawthorn in the
McGuinness,
home and away.
Yeah.
Where it was sort of like, watch out for this, and then it just never happened. So that was fun.
Well, he does love a late change, Chris Scott. He does love a late change.
Yeah, I know. Illness, even when they're not at the stadium, it's a late change.
Yeah.
So send him home, but we won't tell anyone for 3 hours. Their guy Humphreys, he's really good. I know him.
Yeah.
The man from Broome. He's very good. Blitzarves, he's still around. Yeah, they've got pedigree, but they've also got a kind of a large gap between their kind of finals experience players and their young up and comers, which could be the perfect sort of thing. But as I said, I think we should just go in with. I want to see less of us playing their game.
Yep.
Less of us kind of worrying about what their game is, and if what Fagan said, middle of the second quarters, hunt the ball, play your own game, win the contest. Don't worry about tags. Don't worry about that. Like, I'm not saying don't worry about your man you're matching up on, but if you win the ball, you're in control. And we showed that by doing that, it completely changed the game. So if we can go there and we can win the ball, and we can make stuff happen for us, that's great. You're looking for responses for Rayner. Will Zach Bailey show up properly? Man, imagine if Zach Bailey kicks 5 goals. Possible. The thing is, you can't rule it out. Maybe you can. I don't know.
The other thing is, like, our kick mark game that was taken away from us last week, that obviously goes a long way to beating Geelong as well. So it's been, known throughout the season that a kick mark game, uncontested mark, will eventually get Geelong. So if we can get that going...
That's what St Kilda did to them leading into finals, right?
Yeah. It's what we could have done when it was pissing down at the Gabba. I mean, like I said, we didn't adjust to the conditions whatsoever, and Geelong were more than happy to take advantage of that. So, yeah, I think this is one of those games where we spoke about, the 6 years in a row of finals experience. This is going to be the one where it is going to come to the fore, if at all. Like, if it's
how good is it, by the way, seeing guys like McCluggage and Berry being able to kind of lift and be really consistent performers in finals?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were new players when Fagan came in, and we were like, I hope they can be basically the way they are now. How good? Just a little shout out there. But yeah, you're looking at them and they're so solid and they know what to do in these situations, although Jared Berry made a slight mistake in the grand final last year. Let's not talk about that. Yeah, it's nice to see, and there's just an element of consistency, and Will Ashcroft tear it apart again.
I sure hope so. I sure bloody hope so, because like I said, that was one of the all-time, like, that was a coming-of-age performance, and so we've mentioned it in the weeks leading up, the time he came back from that knee and just the way he's been building into this final series, it's worked out really, really well. Just it's timed nicely. He's found his form. He's playing amazing footy, and as Fag said in his press conference, like, if Neil doesn't get you, then that's why we've got Dunkley, McCluggage, why we've got Will Ashcroft, who is really showing, like, proving his stripes now, and there's another one coming next year as well.
It's almost like what they did in the GWS game. It's a bit like, not to mention St Kilda twice in 5 minutes, but a bit like what they used to do with Jack Sinclair, where they'd sort of have him in the halfback and then just throw him into the midfield in the second half. And we're almost doing that sort of slightly on the peripheries and stuff like that. It could be a cool thing to do. A bit of impact, a bit of pep if things aren't quite going our way. But that said, it strikes me a little bit as a bit of a waste if you're going to sort of just play him in the periphery for the first half of the game. But what do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know. Or there's a big part of me that just wants to put your strongest midfield in straight off the bat. Maybe you go Dunkley, Neil, Ashcroft in the middle and see what they do about it. But then, Klug misses out, who obviously had a great game as well. So it's just good. It's good to have the options, I guess, as Fag said.
Yeah, you're never really left with you never play 3 all the time anyway, so you're always looking for rotation and stuff. But yeah, as I said before, hopefully Cam Rayner can lift and pick up and, have another good final, because he was pretty good against Carlton. So pretty good against Port Adelaide last year. So let's hope he can perform in a bigger game. Yeah,
like I said, it's like, you look at it and you think, it can't possibly be as tough as what we've just gone through. Like, this, on paper, it looks definitely not a walk in the park, but it just looks more manageable when you look at it in terms of matchups and gameplay and everything. And then you go, oh, well, it's at the MCG, which I think is a good thing to have another game at the MCG, potentially in the lead up to a grand final. Fantastic. It's not necessarily Geelong's home ground. They've obviously got much more experience there than we do. But it takes away a little bit of that. Like, I'd obviously much rather play them at the MCG than GMHBA.
Well, the difference between the Gabba and the MCG is probably negligible compared to that of Cardinia and the MCG, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think it's only about 2 or 3 meters difference. Whereas Cardinia is a long, thin thing.
Yep.
Or short, thin thing? It's just thin. It's just a normal thin thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Will they stay there forever?
Well, that I was going to ask you about that, because that was something you put forward a couple of weeks ago, that if we have a prelim in Melbourne, to stay down there and hunker down for the week. But
the old pseudo hub.
They've scheduled the game at bit after 5 to allow us to fly back, and I think that's exactly what will happen. They'll fly back and stick to routine. I think messing with routine now would be not ideal. So they'll fly back and.
I reckon they just scheduled the game early to let them go to the pub afterwards or something.
I hope that was not the thinking.
It's just a couple hours at the old workers' club and off to bed.
Lovely.
In the hub, the pseudo hub. Do it. Nah, I don't know. Do whatever makes you feel good. And whatever wins you a fucking premiership.
Yeah, that too. And everyone make sure that if you've got your priority 1s, 2s, 3s, whatever, the ballot I think opens Wednesday morning. So make sure you get your name in for that.
For the grand final?
Yep. Get your numbers in for the ballot. So yeah, that'll be very, very good if we could do that again, and we get to go through the whole mental torment of that for a second year in a row up against potentially Sydney or Port Adelaide.
Yeah, fun to think that if we make it, it'll be against an interstate club.
Yeah, which
So
means you probably get a ticket.
Yeah, probably get a ticket, and it won't be as relentlessly terrifying as last year. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
But what's left to say? I'm not super sure.
Yeah, it has certainly been one of the great weekends of footy for the Brisbane Lions, and let's keep it going because.
Hey, don't forget the neutrals. Great weekend of footy for the neutrals. We didn't really touch on the other game at all, but I guess sometimes when you're Hawthorn and you're playing just on the vibes, sometimes it doesn't always work out. They're sucked in.
Yeah, I obviously love the way Hawthorn play their footy. I really like Sam Mitchell. I loved him as a player. I like him as a coach. There's obviously elements of the Hawthorn Footy Club and the way they go about their business, which I really can't stand. That whole Gen Z selfie celebration.
We're not going into a deep dive about the generation gap this week.
No.
You can check that out last week where we get things slightly wrong but also fundamentally correct.
And Jack Ginnivan gives me the shits with a lot of stuff he does. That Instagram comment was not up there for me. I think out of all the stuff he's done, that's probably fine. But at the end of the day, Port used it as motivation, and they looked tough on Friday night. They looked real tough. So, I mean, egg on his face in the end of the day, and Ken Hinkley decided to rub it in at the end of the match, and he's got himself a $20,000 fine.
I don't think he'll mind.
No.
We have a bit of a difference of opinion on this, but I think if you can't dish it out as Hawthorn and they've been doing it all year, then sucked in basically.
Yeah, I mean, as I said to you, like instead of focusing on cheering off a 300 game player, Ken Hinkley's getting stuck into a kid when he was a kick away from getting fired. Like if James Sicily doesn't hit the post, Ken Hinkley's getting fired. Instead, he's gobbing off to a kid. On the other hand,
I don't know. I don't think Jack Ginnivan's a kid. He's about 22 or whatever. So it's like,
yeah, but
if I played the kid defense at that age, then
no. But what I'm saying is Ken Hinkley's definitely old enough and been in the game long enough to probably pull his hand a little bit. On the other hand, Hawthorn can tell their skibbity story walking. So
yeah, I mean, I didn't mind it. I thought it was well within the bounds of okay. It's just a dude being like 8, suck shit basically, and yeah, I don't mind it. I think that it. Funnily enough, I kind of agree with Kane Corns. It adds a bit of theatre. It was kind of, it's if Hawthorn, if you're Jack Ginnivan or if you're Sicily or whatever, and you can't deal with it, can't deal with dishing it out, then don't dish it out.
Yeah.
And I said to you, I think the funnier thing was Jordan Lewis like losing his marbles. Returning to the post game with no voice because clearly he was so heavily invested. We said off air that it was Hawthorn's sort of first game in a finals position since they'd all kind of like retired and had a bit of space to be kind of okay with the club again. And there was clearly a bit of investment from him and from Hodgie, but I just think Jordan Lewis looked like an absolute dickhead more than he always does anyway. So it's funny. And everyone else was just like, are you serious?
It's funny because Hodgie was getting stuck into Ginnivan as well. And there seems to be like pretty I guess I don't know if it was the overwhelming opinion, but like anything to give your opponent any sort of motivation leading up into finals. It's one thing to be Jack Ginnivan and put yourself out there and express yourself and all that sort of gear, but if you're getting your team involved, that's probably where you need to check yourself a little bit. But I do seem to remember that Luke Hodge may have been caught drink driving in the lead up to finals as well. So glass houses.
Well, that was one thing. So Kane Corns talks about it on the Footy Show and showed all of like Clarko's misdemeanors over the years and being like, "This was your coach,
Yeah.
and you played for him, and you were the unsociable Hawks. Like, pull your heads in. It's not that big of a deal."
Yeah.
A guy like Ken Hinckley's smug face will kind of live in my head as like a pretty, with the lights all kind of going like blip 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 blip, and he's just sitting there with like his bald head with a little smug smile, being like, "Yes, I've just managed to keep my job one more year. Sucked in, everybody." I think it's a pretty funny story, so I don't mind it. Sicily's a moron. Ginnivan, maybe that's why he got his hair cut, so he'd appear younger.
And the same token, like, everyone should be talking about how tough Port Adelaide were on Friday night and like how well they played, but instead everyone's talking about Ken Hinkley again for different reasons. So Ken Hinkley's done the same thing and taken the attention away from the team, and then it's a bit of a, I don't know. My thoughts.
Bit of smoke and mirrors, trying to what they can talk about is that Sydney haven't beaten Port Adelaide since 2016,
which is a remarkable stat, and obviously Port Adelaide did a right number on them just a few weeks ago, so they'll be going in full of confidence if they can replicate that form that they did on Friday against Sydney. Then that should be a belter of a match.
Slightly stupid season. This is stupid season. Yeah, more of it, and then less of it, and then more of it next year. So.
Beauty. All right, well, that'll wrap us up for this week. Huge prelim final against Geelong Saturday evening, and we will be back to dissect the whole bloody thing next Monday.